What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another phenomenal episode of the SEQTEK Podcast. My name is Matt Lemke. I'm the host. Joined with me, as always, is Kenn Williamson. Ken, how you doing, man?
If at podcast, then doing good. Happy Programmers Day, Matt. This is something that I had no idea was even a thing. But apparently the day that we're recording is the day that they celebrate all of the programmers developing and delivering code to quote unquote make our lives easier.
Yeah, I'm glad LinkedIn celebrates us. I don't know if our companies are celebrating us all that much, but
feels like it should be a paid holiday.
It really
right,
should. I mean, we should get the day off. Is really what it should be.
Yeah, but no, I'm doing good. I've been a little bit tired. You were mentioning to me beforehand you're tired too.
Yeah,
Sometimes it's like that. We were up late working on a big problem, delivery deadlines, and sometimes that's the life. You try not to let it get to that point, but sometimes you just have to buckle down and say, this is getting done tonight.
Yeah. I don't know. This is about my third year, and it always seems to me like we get a little slower in summer, but then end of Q3, Q4 is just a dash. And I feel like we're just in that season where it's just becoming a sprint to the end of the year.
Definitely feels like Q3 is like that. I think, it has to do with how they do projects and things like that. Like they're like, okay, it's Q3. We need to deliver. We can't push this project to the next year. Or I don't know. That's above my pay grade. I don't worry about those things. They say this needs to be done. And I say, okay, let's make it happen.
Let's be the agile, man. Just give me a ticket.
That's right. Exactly.
That's all I care about.
Work the tickets.
I do have to ask you real quick. A lot of great feedback. I know you're a big One Piece guy. One Piece live action hit. Have you watched it? What were your thoughts?
I watched it. I liked it. I mean, so I was actually talking with my brother about this, and I don't know if I liked it just because like every adaptation in recent memory of IPs that I like has been absolutely terrible.
Right.
And this one was like legitimately okay.
Sure.
And so I was like, that's a win in the current environment.
Yeah.
But no, I liked it. Some of the criticism I may have is that like they didn't develop the character backstories as well as they do in the manga and the anime. And so like my brother was telling me he was watching it with his wife and she doesn't know anything about it. And just from her point of view, the impact of some of the very emotional scenes wasn't quite there for her. And it was for us, but because we're really invested in the characters and we have all this backstory. So but I would say overall, really well done. Like it was enjoyable, and it's seeming like a lot of people are enjoying it. And they didn't just. I'll tell you what I really like about it is that they made some plot changes. They changed some details around, but at the end of the first season, they have not created any plot holes that are going to cause you to know that they have to change the story down the line.
I see.
Ended up at the same place that you end up at the end of the first arc in the anime and the manga. And so that to me is really good, because something that's frustrating to me when you're watching an adaptation is you get to the end of the first season or whatever, and you're like, how can they continue with the story? Like they've changed too much. They've created these problems that, I guess, they can always resolve them. But anyway, I would say overall, I liked it. And that's kind of my take on it.
Yeah, I was glad to see it's getting such positive reviews. I've dove in a little bit to the anime, but One Piece, I mean, there's a lot of episodes, man.
Coming up on 1,100.
1,100 episodes. It's a commitment. And so for me, it was like, I'll finish this in like a decade, or whenever, 5 years or whatever. So to hear there was a live adaptation and that it is, of good quality was nice, because to be honest, for me, I'm a little like, okay, like I know it's not going to be as good as the anime, guys. I understand. But as somebody who's never watched One Piece, who is just very interested in it, it was nice just to get a little short snapshot of characters, the series, a little bit of just context, a little
Oh,
bit of
yeah.
context.
No, and
to
you could
start.
pick up with the anime after
Yeah.
the first arc, and
Mhm.
you would understand what's going on, which I
Perfect.
think is great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I thought it was really good, and in a lot of respects, it shores up some of the weaknesses of the anime and the manga, which especially the anime, like the pacing is
Mhm.
really pretty slow in the
Mhm.
beginning.
It is.
Where it's crazy to say. It really doesn't pick up until like 200 episodes in, which
Yeah.
is crazy to say, but but it was just like that time period. Animes in general were a little bit slower paced,
Yeah.
and we're in 2023 used to shows getting to the point quite a bit quicker.
That
And
is so good. Yeah.
so, but no, I liked it, and I'm read a good portion of the manga, although I'm not reading as much manga these days, but I'm fully caught up on the anime. One Piece fanatic, and so I put my stamp of approval on it. Good live action adaptation.
Go check it out. One Piece, even if you're not an anime fan, really, really, really good live adaptation going on there. Also, just a quick note, I think we're up to Dark Wizard 5 here. I mean, you got the beard coming out a little bit,
Yeah.
the black shirt.
I don't know. It's either 5 or we're going back to 1, maybe.
Yeah,
or 1 or
maybe
2.
maybe back to 1. I think you leveled up.
Yeah, no, it is.
The Dark
This
Wizard
is my
was leveled
second
up.
gear right here. Little anime One Piece reference there. No, I wish that I could say that it was ever intentional,
Yeah.
but it usually comes down to, like, I go into phases where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna really put some effort into
Yeah.
my appearance, and then that goes away when I get busy or I just stop caring, and so then it comes back to this.
No, I get it, man. I mean, we started this podcast. I was almost bald, and the only reason why I have hair right now is because I literally just don't have time to go get it cut. So, totally understand, man. I don't have the patience or the time right now. So, yeah, man. Let's dive in. We're gonna do a little bit of Dev Corner. This one right here, it's Programmer's Day.
Programmer's Day.
We're gonna gear this one to our developers. If you're CEO, business analyst, PO, this is still gonna be very relevant. But we just wanted to hit on a couple of development topics as developers. Some things that are just relevant to the workflow. Here's where I want to start, Ken. I made a mistake, right? We're ramping up a newer project, right? And I get handed down some requirements. And I think I have a conceptual understanding of what needed to happen, right? And so I just, to just sum it up high level, I'm running a report, and I am running the report, getting all the documents, which is, over 12,000 documents. Below just, the minimal amount of information run that report are all these filters. And me as a developer goes, oh man, look at all these filters here. Let's just not pay attention to them, right? So I go and I get 12,000 rows back in 45 minutes, and we optimize, and we take 45 minutes down to like 3 minutes, right? It's a win. We put it into production. Well, here's the mistake. It now takes 3 minutes to get 12,000 rows of data, but it also takes 3 minutes to get 20 rows of data, which is significantly slower. And the product was used more to get less than it was to get more. So my strategy of let me just go get all the data, filter it down, put it in the tables, do what I need to do. Yeah, it was great when I was going to go get them all, but I ignored all of this business logic in front of me. And I went, you know what? This is a really good moment where I just started to think about, as developers, when you're ramping up on a project, when you're new into a project, maybe it's sprint 0, maybe it's just, the project's in mid form, but you're new to it. There's such a balance of you need to be able to work your story, your ticket, but you also got to kind of have an understanding of the business logic of what's going on. What is your thoughts as a developer on learning just how to navigate between, I know what my story is telling me to do, I know what the goal is here, but I also need to frame, how is this application actually used? How is the end user using it? Because I think sometimes as developers, we can ignore the end user and we just do what we're kind of told to do, and we end up creating a worse product, man. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah. Well, my old adage that software would be easy except for the users, right? So no, it kind of like we kind of touched on this. I guess it was a few times ago when we had Ryan on, and he was talking about, the process, the business process has to
Yeah.
drive the development,
Right.
and so that kind of plays into what you're saying, where like understanding the use case where you're like, oh well, in this particular use case where there was a lot of data, we really sped it up, right? But and then you come to find out that that's not the primary use
Yeah.
case, and so it was actually not working that well. And so yeah, I this is something that um kind of gets overlooked, and a lot of developers, the product ownership is about answering the questions for the developers of what and why,
Mhm.
right? And there's a lot of focus on the what and not as much focus on the why.
Mhm.
But that why question really puts into context and allows the developer to be creative,
Yeah.
to say, um, you know, this is what we're doing, but because like to kind of balance the what and the why. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think that is the biggest key, is that you have to let the process drive the development. You have to understand what is the user's workflow and what are they expecting, and what do they do on their day-to-day in the usual course of events, and
Yeah.
then code to that. And then, you can, like, one thing that I like to say is that I want to code for the 80%, right? And
Yeah.
then start writing,
Yeah.
exceptions for the last 20%, or sometimes it ends up being like 99 and 1%.
Right. Right.
And so, yeah, I mean, it's a balancing act. And so, I mean, I think that in that case, there was probably a little bit of breakdown in communication with the requirements, that, they didn't really give you the tools that you needed to succeed as far as explaining the why and explaining the overall workflow. But then also, it's kind of on us a little bit to ask
100%.
those questions, so yeah, I mean, little bit of both, a little bit of both sides.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And I think it's always really important, at least for me, when um as a developer I'm introducing a bug, I need to go back and figure out like why, like what part of that was like my responsibility, So I can go back and say, yeah, this, if you just look at the requirements, it's like I did I did the requirements, right? But it's also just kind of, and you could, I'm not going to call, well, a little bit of common sense, I guess. I mean, if you're staring at a query and there's 6 filters, I mean, you gotta know they're there for a reason. You can't just ignore them, right? And that's what that was the part for me that I was looking at the business logic and just didn't quite take it into account because I was so narrowed in on the story. And I think that that's just a huge part of it for me is as developers sometimes we just it's a lot. It's a lot of thinking. It's hard to explain to any. Well, I think a lot of jobs are like that, but programming is one of those jobs where it requires so much mental focus and a lot of thinking. It's a puzzle. Every problem is kind of like a puzzle, and you can get so ingratiated in that puzzle that you just kind of forget to zoom out and realize that like this you're just working on the corner of the puzzle, but there's like it's just a really small section. You got to take in the whole thing, as you're working. And so I just thought, that was kind of one of those things for me, that I'm just kind of continuing to learn and wanted to bring up and kind of get your thoughts. One of the things I'm also kind of learning, and really, man, we'll just call this Matt's learning hour, I guess. I just wanted to also get your thoughts, because one thing I'm learning too is so I've been developing in React for like 3 years. And one of the things that's starting to happen is I'm getting, so busy that, we've talked a little bit about continuing to grow and learn as a developer. New technologies and things are coming out. One of the things that I haven't done a very good job of is like, I don't even, I went like a year and I never really read like the release notes, of like what new features are coming down for these products that I'm using all the time. I mean, I'm in React almost every day, right? In Node. And I just, kind of just lost track. And all of a sudden, man, I um it's like, hey, why are you doing that way? And it's like, don't you know that, now you could do it this way? And I'm like, I don't know that, and that's one thing that I'm learning is that, it's the balance of not only learning, keep learning new things as a developer, but also just keeping up with the enhancements, the features that are constantly coming out for these technologies that we use. How do you balance that? I mean, do you read every product update? I mean, what do you do, to kind of keep up with what React's doing or whatever you're in,
Yeah.
your tech stacks?
No, I mean, that's a good question. I think that it is a balancing act because you can get lost in the weeds, and you don't want to just do the newest thing just because it's the newest
Yeah.
thing. But you also want to stay abreast of new features in the language and in the framework. It's kind of a hard question because I mean, I guess really when it becomes apparent to me that needs to happen is when the way that I'm used to doing things becomes deprecated, right?
Hmm.
Like when they're
Hmm.
saying, okay, we're taking this out of the API in the next version that this is going away. That is like a really big indicator.
Yeah.
Okay, this is something that I need to, look up on. But no, I mean, it's just too much. Like that's the thing about technology is that it's progressing so quickly and the
Yeah.
space is so big. Like it would be a full-time job just to keep up with what they're doing with the frameworks that you're using and the tooling that you're using. I mean, it's just they're continually improving it, and so you just want to kind of refresh yourself now and again. One thing that I like to do is really the big time when I look at it is when a new major version comes out. Like
Hmm.
I'm not as interested in the patch notes of like minor revisions because usually that's going to be like some bug fixes or things like that. But when the newest, I'll give you a really good example.
Yeah.
Is when React switched from a more OOP class-based
Hmm.
paradigm to the more functional hooks paradigm. Like that was a time when I was like, okay, I need to sit down. I need to read through, like, here's how I accomplished this
Hmm.
way. How do I accomplish this in the new paradigm? And the real reason for me that you need to do that and stay up to date with those kinds of things is because exactly what you're saying is that the expectation is that when these new features come out, you're expected to use them,
Yeah.
and other developers are going to be doing exactly what you said. Why didn't you do it this way? Why didn't you do it that way? But I mean, it's also like a balancing act because at the end of the day, the how that you're doing it is not as important as the what and the why,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like if it's working, if it's not, deprecated and, has a huge security vulnerability or something like that, then if you're, one or two iterations behind, I personally don't think it's the biggest deal. But when it does become a problem is when the way that you're doing it ends up like with a very verbose code base. This is something that we were dealing with on a
Hmm.
project that I've been on recently, which is that we had code that it all worked, but it was just really difficult to understand because we weren't using some of the tooling of the most
Interesting.
modern .NET. And so it wasn't about, is this functional? It was about, is this maintainable?
Yeah.
And that I think is a big key about why it's necessary to stay up to date with these things
Yeah.
is because from a maintainability standpoint, the longer you go without like looking at what everybody's doing, what the newest features are and what are the new ways of doing things, the harder that transition is going to be. to the point where it can be a big paradigm shift,
Yeah.
and where maybe along the way it was just a bunch of incremental changes. So I mean, maybe that wasn't the most concise answer,
It was a
or
great answer, though. I thought that was a really good answer because it is a balancing act. Listen, you know, developers, we do love technology. You love what you do, right? But we have lives and and families, and it's like, we can't if we had a let's just take a full stack project. If I had to go and read up every time a patch note came out for React and Node.js and whatever CSS package I'm using and whatever kind of API package I'm using, and it's just too much. I mean, there's so many dependencies, especially if you're working like a JavaScript project, right? It's just, yeah, it's unfeasible. So I really like what you're saying. Yeah, understanding what's being deprecated and what's not. And yeah, no, I thought that was a great answer. I mean, you and I, it's so funny you talked about that because there was a project we had both worked on that I think you had kicked off with React before hooks and all that had come in, and then you're moving so fast, we had to go back and like really do a big update on that because it was like, yeah, we were using a lot of stuff that was getting deprecated, and so, but that was literally an example of the speed of technology. By the time you had started that project, you were using the most modern thing. By the time you finished, I mean, it was like light years. I mean, React was a whole different almost code. I mean, it was, you know,
yeah, no, those big paradigm shifts is really what you have to keep up with.
yeah,
And, some of the minor stuff, like really it only applies to you if you're using the things that they're changing.
yeah,
And I'll give a little tip and trick is that if you are only using packages the way that the developers intended, then a lot of times you can ignore the patch notes because they're going to make sure that the APIs and the interfaces for the main workflows of the package stay the same.
yeah, that's good.
Whereas, sometimes like what I see a lot of developers doing is like, here, let me get into the inner workings of this package and hack some stuff through. And then that stuff will change between minor
Yeah,
revisions.
for sure.
And so my general rule of thumb is like I'm trying not to delve deep
Yeah,
into the infrastructure of a package and start hacking on. I want to make it do this subtly different thing. Like
hmm
I would rather work around that with extensions or something that are not going to affect the package, but like my code is going to be built around it rather than reaching inside the package and trying to change some stuff around about the behavior of the package, because that's an easy way to get yourself into a situation where now the usage of the package is untenable because it's gotten to where they're like, okay, we're shifting direction,
yeah,
and the main paradigm and the workflow of the main APIs, they don't change. Like, so if you're not using any of these infrastructure pieces deep inside the package, then it does not affect you at all. But if you are, then now you're in trouble, and it can turn into big refactors where it's like, oh,
yeah.
they've moved a bunch of stuff around. So that you can call that one of Ken's tips and tricks is use packages the way the developers of the package intended you to use them.
100%. Cannot tell you how many times, I still tutor for the boot camp that I went to. And sometimes you get guys in there with a little bit of experience and they're going in and, it's like, look what I did with this package. Like, dude, you gotta leave that stuff alone, because even as a professional, when you're doing this and you're on a company's time, listen, you don't want to be going to your supervisor being like, hey, I've got to go recode all this stuff we did because it was all based on a bunch of package changes I made that are now no longer applicable, and now it's crashing, right? Like I mean, yeah, so important. So, another thing that, and we kind of end off on this, man, I just want to hear What are you learning, man? What's going on for you in the tech, in the tech space? What are some of the big technological, learnings and things that you're coming away with all the projects that you've been working on?
So I've been learning some interesting new technologies. I've been getting into airflow, which is a
Okay.
really interesting technology that is about orchestrating um, like data stuff, and it's really kind of a neat thing where what you can do is you can create what they call DAGs, which is an acronym for directed acrylic graph, and all that means is that processes can only flow in one direction, right? It can't
Okay.
loop back on itself, right?
Interesting.
And so what you do is you write these independent functions that can end up, they can like call each other, they can be triggered externally from a message queue, from a Kafka stream, from any number of sources. And it's really, really flexible. And it's just really makes a lot of data manipulation, a lot of like ETL type stuff, makes it really easy. Like
Huh.
we've been using it to interact with a Kafka stream where like there's a process that uh, loads a bunch of data and then sends off a message. Airflow picks that up, does some stuff with it using some SQL commands, and then sends off another message that gets picked up by another process, and really just allows you to orchestrate these asynchronous processes. And it has a really nice
Interesting.
UI in front of it that you can kind of see all your little guys running. You
Yeah.
can connect them together. I mean, it's just really kind of a neat tool. So that's been really interesting. I've been I've been learning an older technology called WPF, which is a Windows desktop application framework that's for .NET, .NET Core or .NET 6, whatever, and it uses XML, Microsoft's XML. Anyway, that has been I'll just say it's been an adventure, um, and so yeah, I mean that's really what I've been working on, learning a lot about different cloud offerings.
Yeah.
That to me is uh, really so much cool tools in the cloud now,
Yeah.
both on the Azure and the AWS
Hmm.
side, which are the clouds that I have the most experience with. We're trying to leverage those tools. Like my advice for people is like if your company's bought into using a particular cloud, AWS, Azure, or whatever, lean into it,
Yeah.
and start really leveraging their tooling, because so much of it is going to make your life easier. We did recently in the Azure, we did a what they call a static web app, which basically allows you to deploy an API, deploy a SPA like an
Hmm.
Angular or React app or something,
Yeah.
all just really integrated where you don't have to worry about configurations of servers and doing all this stuff. It kind of does that idea for you. It has built-in auth that integrates with AD,
Wow.
and that you can
Yeah.
consume, and it just automatically figures out how to use that. It has a development environment that will mimic those things.
Yeah.
That they have the static web app CLI, and it's just been really cool to use. And luckily I've been working with a guy that's really into the infrastructure as code, IAC,
Hmm.
and has really been helping set that stuff up. And it's just been really a good experience for me so far. Just kind of taking some of the legwork out of it,
Yeah.
like, even going, you do like Docker containers, but
Right.
I mean, that's setting up, like building the Docker container, hosting it in some sort of container
Right.
registry,
Right.
doing all of that stuff. This kind of takes all of that out of it, but kind of gives you a similar result where you have just code. You're not trying to provision servers and manage servers and
Yeah.
and do
Yeah.
all that stuff. So that's been really cool. And yeah, I mean that those are the main things that I've been learning recently. But it is something where like if you're not constantly learning, then you're getting behind. Like
100%. Yeah. I think it's huge. The cloud, I love that you said that. I really think you know going back to tutoring, talking to a lot of people who are coming out of these boot camps, a lot of the question I get oftentimes is like, how do I get job ready? Right. And, you know, the first thing is, do you understand everything that you just learned? You probably don't. You should go and just, keep coding. But also, a big part that I've really tried to hand down is like, listen, you've got to have a basic understanding of system design, and you've got to have a basic understanding of what the cloud is doing, because a lot of companies, a lot of places hire DevOps now, and it's great that you kind of have these full-time DevOps guys. But as a developer, you need to understand what is happening on the server from the cloud side. You need to know what's happening on the code side, and you need to understand a little bit of system design just to understand the interconnectivity of everything. And if you don't understand the cloud side, then one, you're really not fully understanding everything that's required in your code, because there's just a lot of things there that are just trying, that it's literally just connections, right? And then on top of that, it's not that uncommon anymore that you should be able to go in and create a CI/CD pipeline. You should be able to go in and do some of these things. And it really adds a lot of value to you, as the developer, if you're looking for your first job or your next job. But also, it gives you so much context into what's happening in your code.
Yeah. Well, and at least AWS and Azure will offer you free accounts.
Yeah.
And so there's
Right.
really nothing stopping you
Right.
from trying some of this stuff out. And I recommend, like, in our first, like, this is something that the guy I was working with, he had never really done it, even
Yeah.
though he was kind of more on the back end side of things and had some experience with DevOps. But we just followed a tutorial
Mhm.
and kind of learned how it all works, all on the Azure free tier.
Mhm.
Didn't cost anything. And then that gave us the experience we needed to build an application for the client, and really use the tools that Azure gives us to make it really, really easy. So
That's good.
yeah, I completely agree. I think that it's something where, if the cloud's not going away,
Yeah.
yeah, we're only going to get more embedded in it. Like, the reality is that it just makes your life so much easier in so many
Mhm.
different ways.
Mhm.
If you know if you're using it right.
Yeah.
It can also end up being a nightmare of not understanding what's going on
Yeah.
if you don't keep up with what they're doing in the cloud, and all the different tools that they have. So
100%, man. That's so good. Man, we're gonna wrap it up right there. Hopefully, you guys took something away from this episode of Dev Corner. We will be back in 2 weeks with another amazing guest, and we will see you guys soon.
see ya.